who will introduce herself in just a moment. She's been part of our community and growth marketing events for several years now, and she will moderate this panel. And I'm super excited to have our featured panelist as well from Uber and Pinterest. So feel free to post your questions in the chat. We'll get to as many of them as we can. But with that, I'm going to pass it on to you, Ariel. Please take it away.
Sure thing. I'm Ariel Yaffe. I'm the new Senior PM at Iterable, a growth marketing automation platform. Before that, I was one of the first growth and product managers at IBM, working on things like Watson Studio and our IBM Cloud, growing our retention and revenue significantly with a lead nurture and growth process. And with that, I'll hand it off to Abhishek to introduce himself.
Hi, folks. My name is Abhishek. I have been at Uber 3 years, spent the first half setting up the ad tech team that builds data platforms and attribution technologies for growth marketers at Uber. And over the past 18 months, I've been leading driver and career onboarding for all of our rideshare and Eats business. So that's been an exciting role. Earlier, I had a company, a venture-backed company, to build tools and technologies for growth marketers. It was called Zen Marketing. And super early, I was a PM at Zynga, growing social games like Farmville and Zynga Pokers. So I've been doing growth and the platform for the past 10 years. Really excited to be here.
Awesome, thanks. And Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff. I'm a tech lead on Pinterest growth. I've been on Pinterest working on growth for the past 4 years. So I helped build like the initial growth team, work on a lot of different initiatives like SEO, on-auth conversions, mobile acquisition, just all over the board. Yeah.
Awesome. And before we actually jump in, there's a great question in the chat. Are we all product managers? I know I am. Would you guys describe yourselves as product managers?
I'm a technical lead, but I do a lot of product managing kind of stuff. Yeah.
And
yeah, I'm a product manager at Uber. Yeah.
Awesome. So from those perspectives, how would you guys define growth? Just blanket statement. Everyone defines it differently, so your perspective is helpful.
Yeah, maybe I can go since I'm the second one on the screen. Yeah. So to me, it starts with being able to meet the core consumer needs, customer needs, and whether you are doing onboarding or you're designing like a feed system or you're designing like a social system, and that fundamental is very core to growth, and that's where it starts. The second thing is alignment with the business needs, right? So if you're launching a new product, then the definition of growth may be like go figure out the product market fit, see if this is actually like viable or not. If you're ramping up on the S-curve growth, then you are like amplifying, accelerating the metrics. And then, when you're in the mature phase, then you're looking for something else. So how are you aligning with your business needs? That could be highly contextual. And finally, are you building your growth machine or your growth system in a sustainable way that is, economical, sustainable from a scalable perspective? So those are the three ways I think about growth. And obviously it's context specific. But
yeah, I think growth simply is just using data to make product changes that increase your either user count, or if you have a specific kind of core metric that you're looking at, it's just using data and other insights like user research to make good product changes that accelerate your numbers.
Awesome. So it sounds like we have a broad range of definitions. It's a combination of being customer focused, aligning business needs from a data perspective, quantitative and qualitative, like user research, and building out growth systems like Abhishek mentioned. So with that in mind, how do you guys do growth? What's the process for building out that definition?
So process for building out that definition, right? So so maybe I can give an example and use that example to talk about how we do it. So for example, like in my current role, we look at variety of onboarding funnels or workflows around the world. So if you want to become a driver partner or a career partner and join, the rideshare business, you go through like a series of steps and so on. So it's a fairly like mature business, especially on the ride sharing side as well as the Eat side. And the way we think about this is setting up like cross-functional teams that can actually specialize and contribute in each phase of growth lifecycle, right? So starting with like new ideas, diving into research, as Jeff mentioned, like getting like data insights so that we can make good roadmap prioritization decisions, and then really like executing in an economical way. So, testing hypothesis when you have uncertainty, when you have more like go and just build it out and launch and see how it's doing, and then rinse and repeat. So how do you create this classic like cycle of starting with hypothesis, building out, and rinse and repeat, and then execute on that org. So that's how we think about the process of setting up a sustainable growth.
Yeah, so it sounds a lot more iterative and data-driven than a lot of other product and marketing processes, as opposed to planning it all in advance. You're sort of constantly learning. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and I think learning is hard, and doing good experiments is also hard, right? And so there are like a set of things that you are you're doing really fast, and call them like stuff that has low risk, probably like likely lower rewards, not necessarily, but and then you have certain projects or ideas or hypotheses that can bring a step change to your growth function or your growth machine, right? So that may require a longer term planning. So we do some of that as well. So it's a combination of like, hey, let's deliver on the short term results, but also like, let's keep raising the baseline for the long term.
Awesome. And Jeff, from your perspective, do you agree with that definition? Is there anything you disagreed with?
Oh no, I think I was like well, like doing growth is you're basically a team or teams to just launch and run the like as many experiments and also the right experiments. So that involves a lot of different areas. It's not just like it involves like hiring the right people, and it involves like building the right tools so you can monitor your metrics. It involves operationally like what are the best ways to like educate new employees, what kind of meetings are useful, what kind of meetings are not useful, in order to have the highest kind of velocity and the most insights as possible.
Awesome. Yeah, and you mentioned something, run as many experiments as possible. So I'm curious, how do you guys prioritize experiments? And I mean, Abhishek, do you agree? I know that's something I've struggled with in growth, is running way too many experiments and not all of them being meaningful. So how do you guys balance that?
Yeah, so I think like experiment quality is obviously very important. Like one positive experiment can have more impact than like 20 experiments that are not good, which is why like it's really important to kind of vet your experiments before you run them. And the way I evaluate experiments, I use a couple of factors. First of all, it has to have a strong hypothesis with an opportunity size. For example, like this experiment will increase this metric significantly because blank, and then the opportunity size is like 1 million people see this page every day. So it has to have a strong hypothesis and big opportunity size. I look at the investment cost, because time, you have limited time. So it's better to run, if you have 2 experiments that have the same like expected impact, it's better to run the faster one. So the time investment is something I look at. And also precedent is really important in terms of what has worked in the past and what has not worked in the past. For new companies, since they probably haven't run that many experiments before, there's not as much precedent, but you can kind of see what other companies do and use that as precedent also. So those are 3 of the main factors I look at when evaluating experiments.
Awesome. And Abhishek, do you agree with that?
Yeah, and look, the course to me starts with what's your hypothesis, which part of the growth system do you want to actually improve, fix, and then reduce the number of experiments you want to run, right? And in an ideal world, like, yes, we would explore a lot quickly, cheap, and then figure out what's working and then double down on building out and roll out. I think where I see an opportunity around is like post experiment, like how do you continue on a good experiment and even on a bad experiment and follow through. And that might take sometimes like 6 months, sometimes it might take like 2 years to follow through. And that is one of the things that we like for.
So it sounds like there's a wide range of what experiments could be. It could be less than a day, and it could be 2 years.
Yeah.
Is there one that you would recommend for different types? I see in the chat there's a question about, can't growth be defined based on user acquisition and retention? Is there a time frame that's better for acquisition and one that's better for retention, or do you not think of it in that way?
Sorry, do you mind elaborating on this question? What do you mean by time frame?
Yeah, so at least in my own experience, when I'm running retention experiments, retention, especially for B2B products, which is most of my background, retention takes months to actually come to fruition. You don't have an immediate gratification on an experiment for retention because that is the definition. Whereas acquisition, you can kind of tell right away if a change on a acquisition form, like a sign up, is actually valuable. Does it increase conversion to sign up for a demo?
Yeah, this is a great question. I had an opportunity to work on like social games where you quickly kind of see impact, and then do enterprise as well in my startup. So I can relate to what you're saying. So there's a tension between knowing who is valuable, and that could be a really hard problem. And then people try to express that in the form of LTV or other metrics that is very specific to your business. Some things that I've seen work is, hey, can you actually forecast a customer's value from early indicators? Because there's a time value of knowing what's working, what's not working early. There's also like the trade-off of how good your forecast is. So you have to constantly do a check, optimize that barometer where you can try to like learn as soon as possible with the most optimal like forecast. So for example, like let's say when we think about getting a new person, a new driver partner, and we're running a campaign. Let's say we have a hypothesis around messagings, that could be related to flexibility, it could be related to earnings, it could be related to safety, for example. And we're testing a bunch of messaging. Could we actually tell from early funnel behavior or like post-funnel 1 week behavior, for example, that, hey, this is the right fit for this person. This is going to be more valuable to the business overall. And then we can then iterate on that experiment. So that's the trade-off. And sometimes you probably want to wait if the upside of waiting is significant. But I've seen successes when people are able to actually like quickly figure out, hey, this is working or not working.
Wow. So that's really a poignant point. It's experiments when you mentioned experiments can be run for 2 years, what it sounds like is the hypothesis that you're testing can run for 2 years, but you're constantly experimenting and iterating on that experiment during that process.
Yeah, I should clarify. So what I meant was you're running, you mentioned that run as many experiments as possible. So oftentimes we're talking about breadth, you're talking about exploration. What I meant was once an experiment is successful or not successful, how do you run subsequent experiments so you learn more? You continue your commitment to the problem, to the hypothesis, right? So for example, like providing the right support to a customer during onboarding can be a problem that you can spend like 2 years working on it. And what I was saying is, hey, if one experiment didn't work, stay focused on that problem area and then keep trying till you figure out what's working, what's not. So.
Awesome. And Jeff, what's your perspective?
So back to your original question of like, is there a specific amount of time to run acquisition experiments versus retention experiments? Interestingly, I think the amount of time that we run each experiment is around the same. The reason being, for acquisition experiments, it's important to see the retention of the new users that you're gaining. There's a lot of ways to kind of like game and like get additional signups that don't drive value, as in like the user sign up and then they just bounce. So we actually look at the long-term, or not, like, I guess we look at, as Abhishek said, we use indicators to kind of predict the long-term retention of the users we're acquiring. And so as a result, like we run acquisition experiments the same length as retention experiments, which is around maybe a few weeks to a month. And yeah, so we actually run them the same amount of time.
Wow. And Jeff, since I see it in the, and you just talked about acquisition taking a few weeks to a month, same as retention. What would you say is a best practice that you've learned from some of those experiments?
From which one specifically?
Acquisition specifically. So any type of acquisition experiment in particular that you want to share from Pinterest that you know works really well.
I guess there's a lot of like smaller ones. I mean, like SEO wise, like just anything adding more content to your page. Like a lot of landing pages have like individual or kind of like aggregation pages where you have individual pieces of content. Whenever you add more content to the page, it generally ranks higher. So a good experiment to run is how many pieces of content you're adding to each page.
Wow. Okay. And Abhishek, have you ever done that?
Speaking on content, right? Like it's surprising often how much impact a small copy change, a seemingly small copy change, can actually lead to. Comprehension is hard, especially in today's world where people are like just distracted. They're going through a lot of things, in a short amount of time. So how do you like hone comprehension? So, we recently did like a copy test where we changed the headline of a step during our funnel, and that had a significant impact. And most people were on the fence whether this will actually lead to an improvement in impact, as in conversion metrics, but it actually led to a meaningful impact. And so yeah, those are some of the learnings, which never underestimate like basic stuff around comprehension, messaging, copy, in your growth roadmap. So
yeah, I guess to that what Abhishek said, like yeah, copy is important. If you use Pinterest maybe a few years ago, you'll notice that the pin button used to say pin it, and now it says save. And the reason it was changed because in other countries they don't know what pin it means, so that's why it was changed to save, and that was obviously had really big impact.
With that example, Jeff, how did you sort of collect customer feedback about that? How did you learn that was the case?
Well, we did user research that like other people in other countries just were not clicking it as often and like didn't really know what pin it meant. And we just ran. It's really easy to just run an experiment and just see the results. And so like yeah, just changing it, like more people clicked it because they actually understood what it did. Yeah, so as Abhishek said, comprehension is really important, and like people in other countries don't understand things the same way as they understand things differently.
Yeah, and did you see an improvement in the click-through rate on the US side as well?
I don't remember, but it was either flat or up.
Oh, awesome. I love it when that happens, when you're changing something for something specific and then it just increases the overall. Yeah. And Abhishek, have you ever come across something like that? Or how do you sort of understand from comprehension is very difficult to infer that people are not getting it. So how do you sort of collect feedback?
Yeah. And this is, this is a hard one, right? Especially in situations where you as a product manager are not your customer. So for example, like, you're in situations where you're interacting with the product. Let's say you're building a productivity app and you're PM for that. But then in certain situations where your customers are very different from in terms of your daily workflow. And to answer your question, some of the things that we have seen to work, and I see one of the comments here is like removing the company lingo from something that actually is making sense to the customer. And the way we do that is, I like the old school way of actually finding real customers and actually having one-on-one conversations. So for example, we have what we call green light centers, or place where you can actually physically go and get someone to help you, with onboarding, with support issues, and they are extremely successful and really, really valuable and a great place for our customers to interact. So I would actually have PMs in the team and engineers and designers, everyone go there, actually talk to customers, go take copy and actually get their interaction, like have like a very normal interaction and conversation to get feedback. Now, you can't scale that, right? The way you can scale like data or maybe like a survey, but there's significant value in having one-on-one interactions with your customers. So that's what I have found to be extremely valuable, and balance it out with surveys or data and things like that.
Got it. Yeah, that's a interesting case where I absolutely agree, having real customers on one-to-one feedback much easier than trying to infer a lot of information or a lot of narrative from data, because you don't necessarily have that context. I'm fortunate in that I am a customer of the product that I serve, but not all of us can be drivers at Uber or Pinterest wizards. So what, from your perspective, are good practices in terms of collecting that feedback from survey tools, using, once you have that narrative from talking one-on-one, then collecting the quantitative data? I find a lot of the time having a simple anecdote and bringing it to engineering is not always enough. And there needs to be some sort of quantitative drive to get us to make that change or test the hypothesis.
Yeah. So some of the things that, and you're right, yeah, an anecdote, this may not be sufficient, and it just may point us in the wrong direction, because what you're trying to do is prioritize, right? We have lots of ideas, everybody has ideas, which one should we do? So some of the things we have seen to work best practices wise is start with a set of hypotheses when you want to do a survey, and try to get relative signal across those hypotheses. And we have a user research team, folks who are specialized in conducting user research, so that it's you're getting unbiased data, you're getting like well articulated surveys and so on. So starting with product hypothesis works. We've also tried to get feedback directly from the customers on the product, so in the form of like something similar to like a like button, or in the funnel surveys, and that's also valuable. And we can do that, and we have done that at the macro level, but also exploring it at the feature level. Hey, is this valuable? Is this not valuable? So try to collect signals there. We also look at like support signals. If somebody reached out to support asking for clarification about something, hey, what does this mean, or what am I supposed to do? So that's another like signal you can bring in to the discussion with engineering and other cross-functional partners.
Got it.
Yeah. I think to that, yeah, like I guess you want to get a variety of anecdotes, because even like I like the quote, like, yeah, you are not your user, but also users are not like other users. When you have like, I guess, thousands or tens of thousands of users, like not every user is the same at all. So it's good to get kind of like a distribution of like, especially by country, like people in different countries use different apps differently. So yeah, it's good to get a variety of anecdotes to kind of cater for the distribution and not one specific type of user. And also, I guess when talking to engineers care a lot about data. So diving deep into like, okay, how are users, how much time are users spending on each step? What are people clicking? What are people not clicking? I think diving deep into the data can really drive some strong hypotheses.
Awesome. So it sounds like we got 4 really good tools. Surveys, starting with a hypothesis, asking lots of questions, but not leading, using support tickets as a signal and support chats, and getting a variety of anecdotes. The world is diverse in many, so we should expect our users to be diverse as well, and not assume that everyone is the same, as Jeff was saying. And then diving deep into, I like that, how much time you're spending on any one step and the click-through within the product user experience. That definitely, in my experience, has helped resonate with engineering. With that in mind, you guys sort of talked about focus and one of the questions that came up in the chat and probably comes up for a lot of people is attribution. So once you're focused and you deliver this goal, what is it like to say, this is the return on our investment?
Yep, it's a great topic, attribution. So some of the things we have learned or I've seen, I'll share that. Obviously, when we launch these ideas or hypotheses, we are doing a test, right? A holdout test or A/B test, so that allows us to get the incrementality. And on the growth marketing side, you run models like media mix models and attribution models, but then you eventually it's about incrementality. Right? Is it driving an incremental gain to the business, or is it actually adding to the noise? And that is hard to do. Doing tests at scale is hard to do. Picking up the right segments is hard to do. But that's the ultimate goal. It doesn't matter how great your model is, or how complex or simple your model is. Can you actually prove that by launching a growth feature or by launching a new campaign, you've added the incrementality to the metric? So.
And just to follow up really quickly, you mentioned A/B tests. Does that imply a control group?
Yeah. So setting up a control group, and so let's say your hypothesis is by changing, copy, people will have better comprehension at a particular onboarding step or off an ad, and therefore they will have better click-through rate or better conversion. How do you set up the test and at scale in a statistically significant way and see the results, right? So that's that. Or let's say you figured out a new way to distribute your spend across channels, because your attribution suggests that social is contributing more to conversion than search, and you want to switch that mix. It's really about testing that new thing against a control group and seeing whether it's driving an incremental lift to the KPIs.
Yeah. And Jeff, from your perspective, do you believe in control groups? I know that's part of, I've heard a lot of mixed messages from product teams and from growth and marketers. They're saying, why would I miss out on revenue? I already know that my hypothesis is going to work.
Yeah, I mean, those people are probably sometimes wrong, because a lot of times we think that, oh, this thing will definitely work because it worked for another company, right? And then it doesn't, and then we try it and it doesn't work. Yeah, every experiment we run has a control group, or it's not really an experiment. Yes. So yeah, we have a control group for every experiment we run.
Awesome. And then from your perspective, what are some of the best practices around attribution as well? Just give you an
What do you mean exactly by attribution? Like figuring out if a change is caused by an experiment, or is that what you mean by attribution?
So maybe taking a step back, the things that I know I care about with experiments, ultimately from a big picture standpoint, are revenue, retention, and user satisfaction, just within my role. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about how doing one small thing, you made an effort and an investment, how does that relate to your overall business outcomes that you care about?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, as Abhishek said, an experiment will tell you this. You compare controlled and enabled, and you might have to do some, it might be simple or it might be complicated math to determine after shipping your experiment, what is the net impact on, I guess, your core metrics on either revenue or user numbers. I guess for us, our primary metric is WAU. So we run experiments, and then we have different methods of calculating how much additional WAU we would gain in a quarter after shipping an experiment. For example, a sign-up experiment, we'll see if at a 10% group, you increase it by 100 signups a week, then you can extrapolate it out to 1,000 signups a week if you fully ship it, and then multiply by other factors like retention, scaling factors, and things like that. So we use math like that to determine how, after shipping each experiment, how many additional WAU will we gain in the quarter.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to switch gears a bit because I actually really like this question. And it says to the two PMs, but I'm going to sort of bring it to the panel, which is, are we in charge of marketing and sales or serve in a different capacity? So we had talked about this before, you know, there's a very interesting relationship between growth, marketing, sales, product. Do you guys control your marketing, sales? What's the relationship like?
Yeah, so, you know, all these like different functions are essentially trying to, as you pointed, move the business metrics, meet the customer needs, solve problems. And there are different organizational setups, right? In certain cases, they're functionally organized, you know, where marketing rolls up to marketing, product and tech rolls up to product and tech, and so on and so forth. In certain cases, you could be organized like a business, a general management unit, and things like that. So for us, it's more about leading by influence, you know, collaboration, bring people together towards a mission, towards a KPI, towards a set of strategies and roadmap, and have everyone work in their own area for that mission. So it's really important for us to be clear about the definition, understand different functions, goals, how do how do they view success, take that into account, and come up with like a collaborative program, if you will, or a collaborative project, if you will. So that's how we kind of operate. It's less about reporting lines. It's more about like aligning towards an idea, a mission, project.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like it's not really about reporting lines. There's probably a lot of different team setups that can work effectively. For us, we do have marketers in the growth team, and we do have a lot of marketers outside of the growth team. Inside the growth team, we handle all the Facebook and Google ads, and we have like teams of marketers, PMs, engineers, designers because to do ads at scale. You can't like individually edit each ad. You have to do it programmatically. We bid on like tens, hundreds of thousands of keywords, and to update that list manually just doesn't work. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good ways where marketers and engineers and PMs can work together to make something awesome. And but there's also things that marketers can handle by themselves too.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of symbiosis between growth and product and sales and marketing. At least the way that I've experienced it, and you guys sort of touched on this, you're providing sort of the infrastructure from a technology standpoint, like programmatically updating ads and providing customer data to enrich and personalize some of the marketing materials or make sales easier. Does that sound consistent?
Yeah.
Awesome. What do you say to people who are sort of new to this space and say, well, growth, isn't that just marketing?
Well, I'd ask them what do they mean by that? What do they mean by like, growth is just marketing?
Well, at least when we were bringing growth to IBM, everyone was really confused. They said, oh, you do experimentation, you use data, you're emailing people, you're changing how people click through the product to increase sort of conversion rate within the UX. These all sound like marketing things. Essentially applying web-based marketing to products.
Yeah, I'll say the difference is doing that at scale, like not sending emails individually or not making individual copy changes. At growth, like growth teams like doing things at scale. Like for copy changes, you can build a system to optimize copy, test a bunch of different copy in a lot of different languages automatically. Like building that kind of system is something that can be done and has been done by a lot of companies. That's more like growth than marketing. Like you mentioned, I think like you said, like conversion funnels, like automating what kind of conversion flows you give to different users based on different signals is something that's more like growth than like marketing, because you basically need to build like machine learning models to do that effectively. Yeah, it's just like growth is pretty much like it's marketing, but marketing plus engineering, then you get to do marketing at scale.
Mm-hmm. And just to give a little bit more context, the meta on what you just said is that I'm iterating, I'm using data, and I'm constantly trying to figure out how to automate things. And it's a constant learning process. My experience with working with marketers in the traditional sense is I have my tool, someone gives me data, and I plan on a quarterly, yearly, multi-year basis because I have a conference, I have some sort of big event, and then the content comes to me. Whereas what you're describing is I'm changing things, tweaking here and there. Does that make sense?
Or the tool itself is tweaking things here and there. Like a lot of things are programmatically determined now, like what emails to send, what's in the email, what conversion flows people see. Like having the tool automate that itself, but in a really smart way.
Mm. And Abhishek, what's your perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would encourage, going back to your original question, I would encourage that person to think through the customer needs and journeys, right? Not box the problem within a particular function. Like some of the functions that could be very effective for growth are things like support, things like one-on-one interactions, and operations, I think, could be extremely valuable as well. So rather than like thinking about it as a marketing problem only, or a sales problem only, just think about like, hey, what is the customer need? What's the customer journey and the metric you're trying to move? And then from there, you can deduce like what functions need to be built out, or where do you need to focus on? And that might lead to a more first principle driven answer versus a specific like tools or solutions driven answer. So.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of tools, I see in the chat people are asking about that. There's Iterable for growth marketing, Segment for your customer data platform, piping all that data to your various tools, Amplitude for reporting. Those are all things that I've used and have been super helpful, especially for advanced programmatic iteration and experimentation. What are some of the things that you guys use in terms of tools and data products?
Yeah, so we have a lot of like homegrown tools actually, and we built a lot of tools internally. And part of the reason is our business has grown so complex, and our use cases are so specific. So that's one. And we have been using a few other tools like Google Analytics, some Google tools. Use Mixpanel as well. In the growth marketing team. When I had my startup, Uber was one of my customers as well. So
you were one of the customers for what?
Yeah, Uber was my customer. When I had my startup earlier as well. So I think the company has been using external tools, but for the most part, we've built our internal tools in-house to meet our needs.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think, similar, I would say like at companies at this kind of scale, like you kind of need your own internal tools in order to trust your own data, in order to for customizability. So yeah, we pretty much use homegrown tools for like all monitoring or metrics related things. But I guess for smaller startups that can't invest as much into these kind of tools, those tools can be helpful.
Yeah, awesome. And so IBM, we used every tool in the book that was the best tool in its category. I'm a big believer in Segment, simply because for the reasons that we were talking about before, data is really hard to capture in 5 different places and then attribute back to your experiments, where Segment just sort of unifies everything. Everyone's looking at the same behavior data. And someone asked if we use Salesforce. We use Salesforce CRM, both at Iterable and at IBM. IBM has a strong partnership. How do you guys use Salesforce, if at all? Or do you find it hard to use?
In my current team and workflow, we don't use Salesforce. Again, we use homegrown tools. But yeah, it's an amazing product for CRM, for sales operations, sales automation, sales process. So
Yeah, same. Like, I think the sales team uses Salesforce, but I'm not familiar with it at all.
Awesome. Yeah, actually, that's my favorite way to engage with salespeople is looking at Salesforce CRM and seeing how they're processing what relationships are like and opportunities as they come in. But that's the consultant in me. All right, with 2 minutes left, is there any closing thoughts that you guys want to share with our audience? Jeff, why don't we start with you?
I guess just focus on building the right tools, operation, hiring the right people. Growth is not just like one silver bullet kind of thing. You have to optimize a lot of different areas. And so yeah, just try to learn about the different ways you can basically build a team that can launch a lot of experiments and the right experiments.
Yeah, I would just echo that, building on top. Customer empathy, you just cannot do it enough. Like, you just have to obsess over it and think from first principles. Think about the life cycle rather than thinking about the tool side and the hammer that you have or the hammer that you can think of. And yeah, get close to the customers as much as you can, even if it's not scalable. You might get a lot of insights from that. So.
Absolutely. Awesome. And Vasily, you're on mute, but I can see that you're excited to close us out.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be able to host this panel. Ariel, thank you so much for moderating. We had a great engagement today. If you would like to have some questions about this session, whether it's pre-recorded or not, you can review this session on demand. It will be available as soon as I stop the broadcast. So you can review it until the end of the business week, until Friday. And then you will need to get all access pass by clicking on that green button, and it will give you a bunch of other bonuses and 30% discount on the Growth Marketing Conference, Mobile Monkey. It's a super discounted subscription. And thanks everyone for joining today.